lot of good things happening in Anderson 3 before March, and a couple of the highlights were we had finished our one-to-one initiative, and
remind people what that is.
And that's one device per one student, and so basically all of our students grades 5 through 12 have Chromebooks, and then in the elementary most of that was iPads, but we had already started the process of replacing those with Chromebooks. And so from that we have been approved as an e-learning district. So at the beginning of last year we were one of the 15 in the state that were approved for e-learning. We had actually used it for a couple of e-learning days, and so that's something we had really been working toward for about 4 years. And I have to interject here that that's a big product of the penny sales tax that passed in Anderson County about 5 years ago. And I brag to people that I think it passed in every precinct in Star and Ive or in the Anderson 3 community, and that helped us do many things. But the one-to-one initiative, which really, hindsight, that was vital when we moved into March, is having devices in students' hands.
What else did that penny help? Did you want to mention some of the things that penny helped y'all do?
We built a brand new athletic field house. We built a baseball field. We built a FFA arena. We have done a lot of little things in schools, infrastructure things that nobody recognizes but are so important. It also really has allowed us to enhance our technology and our training with technology. So those were the big things. And you talk about, we were about to break ground on our new track when COVID started. We've been working on that stadium plan that includes a new football stadium and a track, and had the finishing touches in place. And so now really that's on hold a little bit just because of DHEC permits. Everything got backlogged from there, but we have a real good project coming and have the money set aside to do it. So a couple other things that I'd highlight is the district during last year, and this was really the result of the year before, we moved to our highest ever ranking in the state. Based on School Digger, we were ranked 7th in the state. We've been really working hard to break that top 10. There's something about being in the top 10, and so our test scores K through 12 really have consistently improved, and we were excited and are excited with that ranking. So that was a good thing. We had
If you can not, you're rocking a little bit.
Okay, sorry.
So no, one more thing. You started there. Okay, I'm sorry. You were moving a little bit more. You started picking up a little bit. That's fine.
Okay. Where should I look?
You look at me or the camera, whatever you're more comfortable doing.
We were real excited too. In January, one of our robotics teams have been invited to Australia to a competition to compete in an international competition. It was actually a group of 4th and 5th graders from Star Elementary, and we had just received, and still have it, a $50,000 grant to make the trip. The trip was supposed to be in July. We're hopeful that they're going to be able to do it next summer, and that we'll be able to take that group. And so that was an international recognition that we had a group receive, and it was going to be exciting because that group of kids had their trip paid for. That's another, lots of good things were happening and are happening in Anderson 3, but that kind of highlights. I will go ahead and say nobody expected the shutdown, but our staff really stepped up in March, after March 16th, to do a lot of great things for kids to keep education going.
And something I've mentioned, I think you and I have talked about before, that people don't think about, the food service people had to step up too and do something they didn't expect to have to do.
Right. In a rural district like us, we couldn't just have food pickup locations. We had to take the food to them. And it really was a whole team effort, but I'll tell you, our bus drivers and our food service staff really stepped up, because every week, every day, we refined this a little bit more, but basically we were sending home food for a whole week. And that was countless numbers of meals and the packing that went into that. And by the time we got to first part of June, we had a pretty good process in place, but it was not without a lot of manpower and a lot of people stepping up. But our cafeteria staff, our bus drivers, because those were the ones who every day they drove the routes and took the food to the students. The amazing thing to see too was that many of our teachers wanted to ride the routes too. And in fact, I had to tell some of them they needed to start spacing it out a little bit more because we had too many teachers wanting to be on the buses. And that says a lot about your staff too, because they miss their students and their students miss them. And of course our assistants were a part of that process because that's where they kind of filled in with their hours because they were not involved in e-learning. But it really became a whole district effort to deliver those meals to students. But I tell you, when you see a child run to the bus, you know they're looking for food, and they were also looking for that smiling face.
And did the e-learning training and the launch of the e-learning here help kind of ease that into the year when y'all suddenly couldn't come back?
I think it helped. It had certainly prepared us, but I think we also had to make a transition in mindset because e-learning was set up for 1 day or 2 days, and it was set up to be remediation or enrichment. It wasn't set up for new learning. And so after we realized we were going to be on this for a while, we knew we had to start incorporating new learning. The other thing it helped us transition, and it's a good transition, is once we knew we were going to be closed, we opened up Google Meets. And so our teachers could actually do the face-to-face meetings with parents at home, with students at home, and that really enhanced the interchange of information and made it more class-like. And that's really going to help us going into next year too.
So we entered in, that last year finished up online, and we got to the summer, it was still uncertain. How did you plan for the fall with all this stuff coming in?
Well, it's been a constant process. To say that this summer has not been busy would be a lie. It's been very busy, and sometimes you feel like you're working toward a moving target, which we are. We had developed one plan that we thought we would start with, and we still have parts of that plan in place, but with the governor's statement about a couple weeks ago, we changed our plan some, and I think one of the best things we probably did as a result of that is moved our start date. Right now in Anderson County and in the upstate in general, cases are still high. And so I think it gives us just some additional time, hopefully, for things to plateau and to start moving back downward.
When is your start date?
Our start date now, our K through 8 will come back August 31st, and that will be for the leap days. Now with that, our K4, we're doing a little bit differently. The teachers and some of our our First Steps staff will be doing some parent meetings with those students and some home visits, and then we'll bring them to the school. So they're involved in it, but they're a little bit different than our K5 through 8th grade, who will, we're wanting all of them here for as normal days as possible. Then our high school will come back on September 8th, the Tuesday after Labor Day. Right now it looks like our high school will be on some type of hybrid A-Day, B-Day, just to get half of the population in the school at the time. Our thought right now with that, and I'll say as of today, is that the high school would be on that schedule at least the first 9 weeks, and then we'll evaluate it throughout to see if we can bring everybody back face-to-face for 5 days.
Is there any, all virtual learning? Do you have any students going to do that? Or?
Well, we're in that process now. Of course, we're offering the Anderson 3 Virtual Learning Academy, and one thing we're trying to make very clear to our parents and community is that this is not e-learning, okay? This is distance learning that really the only difference is you're at home doing what the students in the classroom are doing, basically at the same time, because it will be more synchronous as far as times. If you have algebra at 9 o'clock, you're logged in at 9 o'clock, watching your algebra class, participating through your device. It's just the difference is you're not sitting in that classroom. And so we've opened that up. We've been communicating with parents really this whole week. And by Friday, July 31st, our parents have to make a commitment to be online or not. And I'll tell you right now, our initial survey, we had about 25% who were interested. And what we did with that is if they were interested, they filled out a survey, and then our buildings have been contacting them, talking to them, because we want to make sure they understand what's really involved in that virtual platform and what they're committing to. We also want to make sure they understand what we're doing to make our buildings safe and clean and sanitized, because ultimately we want all of our students to come back to our buildings. That's where we feel like we can serve them the best and that they can get the advantage of every opportunity we have for them. Because now in our situation with K through 8, most of the virtual learning students will just be doing the core, English, math, science, and social studies. So, what they're giving up there are your art, your music, and some things that are really, that to me develops that whole child, but it's also more difficult to deliver in a distance learning platform.
Well, let's talk about that since you mentioned it. What about the extracurricular activities, athletics and drama and band and all those things? How much of that's going to survive?
Well, I think the first thing everybody looks at is what are you going to do about sports? And really, that's mandated by the South Carolina High School League. And so we're right now, they're at what's called, I think, a 1.5 phase of what can be done. I think the real one mark of how things are going to move is if they stick with, I think it's August 17th or somewhere in that time when they can actually start practice for fall sports. And if we actually get fall sports off the ground. If that happens, I think everything else will fall into line. Now, having said that, we're going to be very cautious as we open school. Our mindset here is academics is first. I first just want to keep my school buildings open with students coming in. And so in doing that, we're going to minimize visitors and minimize extracurriculars somewhat. I mean, beyond your sports, we'll look at clubs and things like that, but really encouraging principals that unless it's just vital, that we put those things on hold for about 9 weeks and see where the numbers go and see how things are going. So it's not that we're not going to do them at all next year, but it will be a slower approach to bringing them in. Now at this point with band, my understanding is that many of the band competitions have already been canceled. So we'll look at ways to showcase what our band students are doing, but I think that's kind of taken care of for us. We have a skeet shooting team that's very successful, and we also have an anglers team that's very successful. They actually went to the nationals this summer, and what we followed with those students is when their federations restarted competitions, we allowed them to restart, because in most of those cases, social distancing is not difficult, just the nature of it, and it's smaller groups. So things like that, it kind of follows the group size, and it also follows whatever supporting, sponsoring agency is doing.
What about the challenges for the Career Center where a lot of the learning is so hands-on? It'd be kind of difficult to do some of that stuff.
Yes, and that's a place where, in my mind, I'm really encouraging our students to keep going to the Career Center. That to us, and one thing we're telling our students is the Career Center is not really a virtual option. And a couple of reasons for that. One, they're there 3 hours a day. And so really when you talk about limiting contacts and social distancing and things like that, which goes into the next thing, class size is typically smaller at AIT. So when you think about half of their day is spent there in a smaller class size with fewer contacts, that fits what we're trying to do to minimize exposure. So, and plus it's real hard in most of those programs to get the full effect if you can't do the hands-on stuff. It's just not a good model for most of the programs to deliver them virtually. So we'll try to encourage, even if a student says, I want to go to virtual in other areas, our approach right now is, okay, if you want to go to the Career Center, let's go for those 3 hours a day, and then your other 2 courses, we'll work on doing distance learning. So it's really a blend. And for the high school especially, I think of it more as an individualized plan for most of those students anyway, because you have to look at dual credit that we teach in-house, that they go to Tri-County for, AIT. I mean, there's just AP classes. There are just so many things that come into place. It's really more of, okay, what does each child's schedule look like?
How would you evaluate the first year of the Anderson Institute of Technology and that cooperative?
I think it went really well for the first year. We had been talking a lot about building our numbers and had just completed signups before we went out for COVID, and it's disappointing, and we'll see how those numbers go, but I felt like we were going to have a great increase in participation there with our students this coming year. I don't know how much the situation we're in now will affect those numbers. I expect they're not going to be as high as we thought they would, but as far as the first year of a career center and the quality that the students have gotten with the learning and the logistics, they have come together very well.
How have your teachers responded to all this chaos? May be the best word for it. Nobody expected this to be education when they came.
Well, and our teachers have stepped up. For the most part, I just can't describe to you some of the things I saw our teachers do online with the Google Meets and the way they reached out to students. And it was so refreshing to see how much they really missed their students. I mean, you hear people talk about students missing their teachers, but the teachers miss their students. And like I said earlier, when we were delivering lunches and maybe one teacher found out another teacher went, it's like, okay, I'm going tomorrow. And then I'm going the next day. And that says a lot, because they were teaching their classes online, but they were also riding a bus for an hour a day voluntarily. And so that's what you want to see. And we've seen some teachers in some professional development we've been doing this week, and they're like, we're so ready to come back to school. We want to see our students. We want to get back to what we think of as normal. And so it's been refreshing to see that our teachers are really true to their calling. They care about students. They want to be with students. And it's like I said, we know the best place for students to be is in our schools.
Is there anything you can think of that through all of this you may have learned that once there's a vaccine or things are better that will help you going forward that y'all have learned from all this?
Well, I think one thing we've learned is kind of one of those background things you learn is really just to take things step by step. I hesitate to use the word patience, but we probably should say that, is because I think as educators and maybe just as humans in general, we want to know what's going to happen. And I think teachers are much like that because most are perfectionists. And I think we've learned to just take it one day at a time, to adjust to it. And I think we've also learned that we can do that. And it's really, I think, caused us to focus more on students. Now, I guess the things you can point to that you've learned, I think we've become better at distance learning. I think we've become better at using technology as a teaching tool, because that's really what I saw develop in our teachers throughout this time, is that we're using the technology to teach, to enhance. We've built on our capacity of resources and teaching and things like that. So I think that's the takeaway, that if we have to go back to long-term distance learning for everybody, I think we feel prepared. I think we know what we're doing now, and I think we've adjusted our mindset. I would like to say, I think there's a few things, talked about of visitors in our buildings a minute ago. You know, everybody wants to know, are you making everybody wear masks, or what are you doing? And there's a couple key things we have put in place that I think will help with the social distancing. One is mask, and the best description that I can give you about our policy is basically masks are required everywhere but in the classroom. And then once you get in the classroom, it's kind of based on teacher discretion, based on the activity going on. So if you're sitting at your desk and you're 6 feet apart from somebody else, a child may take their mask off. If they're in group work, they're probably going to have it on. Our teachers will have masks and face shields, because it's very important, especially in elementary, to see the teacher's mouth move. And I think even in middle and high. So, you know, we're taking the precautions like that everybody's talking about. We're going back to doing breakfast in the classroom. That was something we had been doing it in all of our buildings about 5 years ago. But this year that will be, so that's one way that they won't be congregating as much. We're doing some staggered lunches to again, trying to keep those social distancing things in place. And so what I really want to say to our parents and community is we're putting everything in place we can to keep your students safe. And that's really been the history of Anderson School District 3. We were one of the first districts, even though we're probably one of the poorest districts, to put an SRO in every building. But our board said a long time ago that safety and security of our students was first priority. And we done, the buzz-in systems and things like that to do that security. So now I think we've switched from safety to health of children. And so now we've looked to put everything in place we can health-wise. Another thing our board's done that I think put us in a good position or a better position for this, that I'd like for our parents to know, is that our class sizes, especially in elementary school, are better than most surrounding districts. And that comes back to a board goal of in K through 5, class size 18, 19 to 1. And so that just helps when you're thinking about numbers of students in classrooms and trying to space them out. We had already added an ELA teacher and a math teacher at the middle school even before COVID happened, and that was because we had bigger than usual 6th grade coming in and 8th grade, and so we were using that to reduce those class sizes. So that plays into helping us take care of our students, because we feel like they've got to be safe and healthy before you can teach them. And that goes for staff too. So just wanting our area, our community to know that we're doing everything we can to look out for children. And that's what we've always done.
So going forward, it's just wait and see what happens. If things get worse, you'll have a plan B to jump back into. Mm-hmm. And if not, you're going to work on the plan you've got now. Is that, I understand that right?
Right. We had put out 4 models that we might be on at any time. And of course, model 1 was just your traditional face-to-face, and model 4 was full-scale distance learning. And in between, we had a second model that was face-to-face, but some distance learning days built in. And that's one thing we'll look at as we go, because I've read some research about how in times like this that incorporating a distance learning day here or there helps your teachers, helps your students even, and it also gives you some time for maybe deeper cleaning in your building. And so that may be something we incorporate depending on what the situations are. But that's the schedule 2. And then schedule 3 is a hybrid, which is really what the high school is really starting on. But for the high school, when you're talking about 800 students and trying to socially distance that many students, that's why we wanted to go ahead and start them on that schedule anyway, to kind of work that out.
How are y'all communicating with parents? Because I'm sure they're all nervous and trying to figure out what's going on.
Well, it's a good time to talk about the Anderson 3 app. We encourage all of our parents to download the Anderson 3 app, because that's where we push out a lot of notifications. It's linked to our social media, Facebook and Instagram page, and our website. But what typically happens is our schools do a really good job of sending out push notifications through text message, or just a notification that shows up on a person's iPhone. And so that's how our principals will communicate a lot. Another thing we'll do is put like succinct summary information on the Facebook page, and then point them back to the website for more information. And I think social media is where more people see things anyway. And so if we can get their attention on the social media and then get them back to the website where there's more detailed information, that's the way we get it out. With our Virtual Learning Academy, we really wanted to make an effort to talk to every parent. And so that being an example, we pushed out the notifications, we pushed out a survey, but then when we got the names back, we actually have called every parent from our buildings, and that's probably 800 parents that between 5 buildings have been called, but really wanting to make sure they have the information. But typically, if somebody calls the district office with a question, we'll try to answer it, of course, but 90% of the time I can send that back to the school that it relates to, and the administration there, or the guidance counselors, they can give a much better answer than I can. So the first place I'd tell anybody to go for information, truly school-based information, is to the school. They have the best relationship. But if you can't get them at the school, we're here, and we'll help direct you to.